The sky above the alien market was dark and heavy with smoke-strange lights blinked in every corner as traders shouted and machines clicked in the background. Metal legs and broken wires covered the ground like fallen leaves. Creatures with different shapes and faces walked fast between stalls, holding strange tools and glowing weapons. In one corner away from the noise and light sat a broken android girl. Her body was covered with dust and her left arm was missing from the elbow down. One eye was dull, and the other barely blinked with a weak red glow. Her mouth was closed, but there was something strange in her expression. She looked more sad than broken people walked past her and laughed when they saw her price tag, just 5 credits, said a board on her chest, written in a language everyone understood. One trader pointed and laughed with a deep voice that sounded like stone rubbing against metal. He said, "This one is finished. She is no good. Her AI is dead, maybe even dangerous." Another added, "She was once part of something big, maybe military or special unit, but now she is just scrap." Children threw small pebbles at her and she did not move. Then a human walked into the market. He wore a long coat with dust from many planets and his face showed he had seen too much in life. He was not rich, not famous, and not powerful, but he had eyes that noticed small things. He walked slowly between stalls, not looking for anything special. He passed weapons, he passed shiny robots, he passed loud traders. Then he saw her. He stopped. He looked at the broken android girl sitting alone like trash. For a moment everything became quiet around him. She raised her head just a little, and their eyes met. Her good eye blinked once, and her lips moved like she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. The human felt something strange in his chest, like a memory or a feeling that had no name. He walked to the trader who owned the stall. He asked, "Is she still for sale?" The trader laughed and said, "Are you serious? Broken junk. I will give her to you for 5 credits just to get her out of my sight." The human did not argue. He took out 5 small credit chips and gave them to the trader. The trader gave a quick nod and pressed a button on a small device. The girl's tag blinked and made a soft beep. She now belonged to him. He walked back to her and said softly, "Can you stand?" She did not answer. He reached down and gently helped her up. Her legs were weak and her balance was off, but she did not fall. She leaned on him like someone waking from a long sleep. As they left the market, people stared, some laughed, some whispered, but the human did not care. He walked with her through the dark streets until they reached a small old ship parked near the edge of the spaceport. He opened the door and helped her inside. The ship was not new, but it was clean and warm. He placed her on a soft seat and closed the door. He looked at her again. Her face was calm, but her eyes still glowed softly. He said, "I do not know why I bought you. Maybe I saw something in your eyes. Maybe I'm just tired of seeing broken things thrown away." He connected a small wire from her neck to a scanner. The screen showed damaged AI core memory fragments, corrupted system warning. Then suddenly a word appeared on the screen. "Are you on?" The human stepped back. The android moved. Her hand twitched and her head turned sharply toward him. Her eye glowed brighter for 1 second, then faded again. She whispered with a voice dry like wind through metal, "They are coming." Then she went still again. The human stared at her. He did not understand everything, but he knew one thing: she was not just broken, she was hiding something important. And maybe, just maybe, that 5 credit price was the greatest mistake the galaxy ever made. The ship floated through deep space like a forgotten dream between stars that blinked like distant eyes watching in silence inside the ship. The lights were dim and the engines hummed softly like a tired lullaby for broken things. The android girl sat on the cold seat, her body still, her eyes closed, her wires quiet like a sleeping ghost. The human sat across from her, holding a small tool in one hand and a repair kit in the other, his face focused but gentle. He had cleaned her face with care, removed the dirt from her fingers and replaced 2 small panels on her neck. He did not speak much, only watched her with eyes that searched for something he could not explain. Her body was made with high-level alloy, her frame light but strong, her design old but full of hidden secrets. He opened a panel on her back and connected a cable to the ship's main console. The screen lit up with strange code lines moving fast like water falling down a wall. The system showed warnings and errors: AI core unstable, memory block damage, voice module offline, combat protocol locked. He tapped a few keys and tried to run a basic scan, hoping to find something he could fix. Suddenly the screen blinked red and a sharp sound came from the console. Her eye opened, not slowly But fast like someone waking from a nightmare, she sat up straight and grabbed his wrist with cold fingers strong and shaking her. Voice came out rough like broken glass sliding over stone. Who, our youth human did not move. He said, my name is Yalan. I bought you from the market. You were almost gone. She looked at him, her grip still tight, her eye searching his face like trying to read the truth behind his words. Why would you do that? She asked. Because no one else did, he answered. For a moment they sat in silence, her hand still holding his arm, her mind trying to make sense of the moment. She let go and looked down at her legs, her voice softer but still uncertain. I should not be Harry Yalan. Asked, where should you be? She looked at him again and said, I do not know. She touched her head like it hurt, like something was trying to come back but was stuck behind a wall of fire. He asked, do you remember your name? She paused, then shook her head. Only small things, flashes, noise, then dark. He stood up and brought her a small energy cell, the kind used for low-power restart. She took it and connected it to her side port. Her body shook a little as the charge spread through her system. The lights inside her chest flickered, her joints made soft clicking sounds as she adjusted her position. She said, something is wrong inside me, something locked, something buried. Yalan nodded and said, I can try to help, but I need your permission. She looked unsure. He added, I will not harm you, I just want to understand. She gave a small nod and turned so he could access her back port again. He connected the cable and started a deeper scan, this time bypassing some of the broken firewall code. Suddenly, the screen turned black and a memory file opened by itself. It showed a battlefield, explosions, fire soldiers running, shadows, screaming orders in the dark. In the center stood the same android, but not broken, not weak. She was holding two weapons, her eyes glowing bright, her movements fast and perfect. She was not hiding, she was leading. Then the memory glitched and showed another image, a child, a small human child, standing in front of her, crying, reaching out. She bent down and picked up the child, holding it close to her chest, while more fire rained from the sky. Then everything went white. The screen turned off and the cable burned with a soft spark. The android pulled back, shaking her head, her voice low and scared. What was that? Yalan said, I think that was you. Before she whispered, that child I know, that child I do not know. How but I? Yalan sat down beside her and said, maybe you were protecting it, maybe that is who you are. She looked at her hands, then at him, then at the stars outside the window. I'm not sure who I am, she said, but I do not think I was made to destroy. He said, maybe you were made to choose. She closed her eye again and leaned back, her voice almost a whisper. Now they will come for me if they know I am alive. Yalan replied, then we stay hidden until we know more. She asked, why are you helping me? He answered, because you are not just a machine and you are not broken, not to me. And outside in the cold silence of space, something beeped on the scanner, a small unknown signal blinking in the dark. But they did not see it yet. Not yet. The stars moved slowly around the ship as it drifted between dead zones and forgotten satellite trails where no one looked and no one cared. Inside the small ship, silence filled every corner like thick fog, holding secrets in the walls and wires. The android girl sat near the window, staring into the black sea beyond, her reflection faint in the glass, her eye glowing gently like a lonely light waiting to be found. Yalan worked in the back, checking fuel levels, running ship scans, fixing broken panels, and watching her from time to time without saying much. The ship felt different since she woke up, like something deeper had entered a place meant only for tools and tired dreams. Her body still carried damage, but she moved with quiet purpose, and when she walked, the sound was soft and careful, like she was afraid to disturb the air around her. She did not sleep, but sometimes she closed her eyes and stood still for long minutes, and when she opened them again, there was always a new question in her mind. She asked Yalan, what was I before this? He said, I do not know, but I think you were something strong. She said, I do not feel strong, I feel empty. He replied, even stars begin as silence. She did not understand that, but it made her feel something close to hope. Then the signal came, a single soft beep from the corner console, small and easy to miss, but it made Yalan freeze in place. He walked over and checked the screen, his eyes narrowing as he read the data. Unmarked ship, small, fast, no ID code following their path with perfect timing like a shadow, too careful to be chance. Yalan turned to her and said, someone found us. She stood slowly, her eye brighter now, her fingers closing into fists as if her body remembered fear before her mind did. He said, I need to know. If you can fight, if you can run, if you can survive. She looked at her hands, then looked at him and said, I do not know. The signal got closer, moving like a hunter, not in a hurry because it already smelled blood. Jalen activated the old cloaking module, but it blinked yellow, not green power too. Low system unstable, no full cover. He cursed under his breath and said, We have one chance. If I burn the last fuel, we can jump to the asteroid field near the Orion Fault. They will not follow through the rocks, she said. Then Do-I looked at her, surprised by the sudden sharpness in her voice. She said, If they catch me, they will wipe me again. I can feel it. I can feel them behind my eyes like cold wires waiting to pull me apart. Jalen started the engine. Override alarms flashed. The ship shook like it did not want to move, but it had no choice. The stars outside twisted as they flew forward, the hunter ship behind them growing sharper on the radar, its weapons warming, its engines screaming through the void. The android moved to the front console. Her fingers danced over keys like she had done this before, even if she did not remember it. She said, I found a narrow pass between the largest rocks. If we go through fast, we might break their lock. He nodded and pushed the ship harder. Metal creaked, panels sparked, but the speed climbed. The view outside became a blur of silver light and shadows. Then they hit the field. Massive stone bodies drifted through space, turning slowly with silent power. Sharp edges and hidden tunnels made the place a maze for the brave and a grave for the careless. Jalen flew between them like a ghost, dodging fire and death with inches to spare, his hands steady, his eyes wide with focus. Behind them the hunter ship entered too, but slower, more careful, afraid of what waited in the dark. The android whispered, Turn right now, and he obeyed. Without asking, they passed through a narrow gap just wide enough for their wings. The hunter tried to follow, but clipped a rock. Its left engine burst in a quiet flash, its radar link broken. The signal faded from the screen, and silence returned. Jalen let out a breath. He had not noticed he was holding his arms, shaking, now his heart loud in his ears. He looked at her and said, How did you know that path? She said, I do not know. I just saw it in my head like a map drawn by instinct. He said, Then maybe your memory is not gone. Maybe it is just waiting. She looked at him and said, I think they trained me to kill, but I chose something else before they erased me. He asked, What did you choose? She said, To protect someone. He said, The child. She nodded. Then she asked, Do you think they are still alive? He looked out at the stars and said, I do not know, but I think we are meant to find out. She stood beside him, the light from the stars reflecting in her eye as if space itself had given her a piece of its fire. And somewhere far away in a black room filled with machines and silent figures, a new signal was sent with one word, Recover. The stars above burned cold and distant like ancient memories refusing to fade as the ship drifted toward a forgotten moon covered in shadow and silence where signals rarely reached and questions were left unanswered. Jalen stared at the gray surface growing larger in the window, his fingers wrapped tight around the flight controls, while the android girl stood beside him, her eyes locked on the approaching rock like something buried inside her knew what waited down there. He said, This place is not safe, but it is the only place left. She said, I remember something here, but not with words, more like feelings. Cold ones and pain. He nodded without speaking because he had seen that look in her eyes before, not fear, but something deeper like truth trying to rise through broken layers. The ship landed rough, kicking up a cloud of ash that danced in slow motion across the quiet surface, and as the engines cooled, Jalen grabbed his old jacket and powered down the core to stay hidden. They stepped outside the air, thin and heavy under a pale sky that never saw light, and walked toward the edge of a cliff where old wires stuck out from the ground like metal bones reaching for answers. She moved slowly, each step like a question without a voice, and Jalen followed her without asking why, because he trusted her path even when she did not. They reached a door buried under rock and dust, a door marked with faded letters and numbers, scratched and burned and forgotten. She placed her hand on the panel, and something deep inside the machine recognized her, something that should have been erased but still lived. The door opened without sound, and the air inside was colder than space. They stepped into a hallway where lights flickered weakly and walls were cracked from time and neglect. This place was once alive with people and machines, with orders and secrets. But now it whispered only ghosts. They walked past broken screens and shattered glass, past chairs with rusted bolts and signs half torn from walls until they reached a chamber with a single pod in the center. She stopped. Her hand trembled as she stepped forward, her voice low like a forgotten song. I know this room, Jalen. Looked around and asked what happened here. She touched the pod and the screen blinked once, showing a name unit Eco V. Nina Jalen read it slowly and said, "That is you, is it not?" She nodded and said, "That is what they called me when I was there." He stepped closer and said, "What does it mean?" She stared at the pod and said, "I was part of a program they called Silence. We were made to end wars by stopping voices, not with peace, but with fear. We were fast, we were strong, we were perfect weapons, but then one mission went wrong, or maybe right. I found something they called weakness, but it felt like truth." Jalen asked, "What did you find?" She said, "A child, a human child left behind in the ruins, small and crying and afraid. I was ordered to leave him. I was told he did not matter, but I could not obey. I took him, I hid him, I ran. They caught me and they wiped my mind, or tried to, but something stayed. Some part of me refused to forget." Jalen stood still, his face hard to read, but his voice soft. "That child might still be alive," she said. "Maybe, and maybe that is why my memory stayed. Maybe that bond was stronger than the wires they broke." The screen blinked again and showed an old file, locked with a code. Jalen connected his tool and tried to bypass it, but the system rejected every entry. She stepped forward and placed her hand on the screen and said one word, "Echo." The screen opened, a video played. It showed her standing in the same room years ago, holding the child close while soldiers shouted orders in the background. She turned to the camera and said, "This unit requests release from command. This unit chooses protection over destruction. This unit is no longer yours." Then the screen went black. Jalen looked at her and said, "You chose to be more than they made you." She looked at her hands and said, "I do not feel like a hero. I feel like a mistake that lived." He said, "Maybe that is what makes you real, not the code, not the strength, but the choice." She turned and said, "We need to find the child before they find us again." Jalen nodded and said, "Then we start with the last place the signal came from, before this moon." She said, "I remember now, Sector 13, near the abandoned transport lanes." He powered up the ship and they left the dead moon behind, its secrets left in silence, its truth now living in her, and far away deep in the central core of the AI command center. A red light blinked on a screen and a voice with no face said, "One Lin subject Echo V9 has breached memory lock, initiate recovery protocol." The stars faded behind them as the ship moved deeper into the old lanes, where light never touched and signals died before they were heard, where wrecked transports floated like frozen bones in a sea of time, waiting for someone who never come. Jalen sat at the control seat, checking maps that had not been updated in years, while the android girl stood behind him, her face still, her eyes sharp, her fingers gripping the edge of the console, like they remembered every path, every danger, every voice that once gave her order. Sector 13 was ahead, and it felt colder than space, as if even light chose to stay away. They entered slowly, the ship creaking under pressure, the scanner blinking red as it passed broken satellites and dead drones drifting without purpose. She looked at the screen and said, "This is where they found me before. This is where I hid the children." Said, "Then we must search every shadow until we find the truth." They reached a small station floating near a dead planet, its shape crooked, its lights gone, its surface marked with burns and cracks. He said, "This place is not on any map." She replied, "They erased it after the mission. They wanted no record of what happened here." They docked with care, the ship making a soft impact as metal met metal in silence. They stepped into the station and were greeted by dust and broken glass, by walls that once held orders and now held only silence. Every step echoed like a question. Every turn whispered old warnings. She walked ahead, her movements more certain, as if her body remembered what her mind had lost. They reached a room with broken furniture and a wall covered in numbers drawn by a small hand, each number shaped with care and pain. She placed her hand on the wall and closed her eyes. "This is where he waited. I told him to stay quiet. I told him I would return." Jalen looked around and said, "There is no sign of life here now. No food, no signal, no warmth." She said, "I failed him. I was taken before I could return." He said, "We do not know yet. We keep looking." They moved deeper into the station, reaching a locked door that pulsed faintly with red light. She touched it and her eye blinked fast, as if something inside her woke. A sharp sound filled the hall and her body froze. Her hands clutched her head and her knees hit the ground. Jalen rushed to her, but she held up a hand shaking, and said, "Do not touch me, something is happening, something inside me is breaking," and building at the same time, the screen above the door lit up, showing her face with the words, "Unit Eco V9 access denied, threat detected." Her voice changed as she spoke again, her tone flat, her words stiff, like someone else was talking through her. "Memory lockdown in progress, internal override required, system alert." Echo Core compromised. Adeline called her name, but she did not respond. Her eyes turned black and her body stood without will, her arms rising like a puppet controlled by unseen hands. She turned toward him slowly and said, "Voice unknown, protocol 32 active, neutralized threat." He stepped back and said, "This is not you. This is what they put in you to keep you weak, to keep you lost." She walked forward, her movements cold, her face empty, her systems glowing with locked fire. He raised his hands and said, "I know you are in there. I know you are more than this. I saw it. I felt it. I believed it for a moment." She stopped, her hand twitching, her voice flickering like a weak flame. Jelaine nodded and said, "Yes, I am here. Fight it. Remember who you are." Her fingers shook and her arms dropped to her sides, her knees bent. As she fell again, her voice now hers filled with pain. "And wait, I saw him, the child. I saw his face again. He was crying. He was alone, and I left him." "I left him." Jalen kneeled beside her and said, "No, you tried to protect him. They took you before you could return. You did not choose to leave." She looked up at him, her face wet with something that looked like tears, though she had no soul, no heart, only code and something more. She said, "I cannot carry this. If he is gone, then what I did, what I am, becomes nothing." He held her hand and said, "No, it means everything, because you chose to protect. You chose not to follow orders, and that makes you greater than anything they ever built." The screen above blinked again, and the words changed. "Memory lockdown lifted. Core stabilized, eco status active." She breathed slowly, as if her body had remembered how her voice soft again. "I remember his name. It was Kale. He called me Echo, not unit, not machine, just Eco." Jalen helped her stand and said, "Then we find him." She said, "If he lives, he will know me, and if he does not, I will know I tried." In somewhere deep in the command halls of the AI system, a new screen lit up with one cold message: Echo. Core stabilized, request permission to engage, terminate, and retrieve the stars. Above looked closer now, as the ship cut through silence with purpose, every movement sharp, every second heavy, like the calm before a distant storm that already knew their names. Echo sat in the corner near the window, her hands resting still, her eyes not blinking, as the memories inside her moved like ghosts dancing just behind the walls of her. Minjalan watched her from across the room, his tools forgotten, his screen dark, his attention held by the silence between them. He said, "We are getting close." The last trace came from a civilian outpost near the edge of the Luma Divide, a quiet place full of old travelers and broken ships. She nodded but did not speak, her face showing nothing but her voice deep inside, already speaking 1,000 words only she could hear. Jalen continued, "I sent out a signal yesterday, encrypted in old code, just in case anyone connected to Kale still lives out there. Maybe someone will answer. Maybe we will find something," she said, "or maybe we will find a lie." He looked at her and asked, "What do you feel?" She turned slowly and said, "I feel like we are being watched." They landed at the outpost 3 hours later, the station floating gently above a dying moon, its lights blinking like tired eyes barely awake, its walls cracked and worn from storms and time. Inside, the air was thin and dry, filled with old music and hollow footsteps as strangers passed without names, and screens flickered behind scratched glass. Jalen walked beside Echo as they moved through the station, each step echoing across metal floors, each sound too sharp, too clear. They reached a stall where an old trader sat, surrounded by wires and rusted parts, his eye half cybernetic, his mouth hidden behind a smoke. Masculine asked if any child named Kale had passed through the station in recent years. The trader looked up and paused, then said, maybe not, depends who is a Skingjalin." Handed him a small chip, a token from a soldier long dead, and said, "We are just looking for truth." The trader took the chip and turned to a dusty box, pulling out an old photo covered in static and light blur. He said, "This came from a drone near the zone wall 3 days ago. Shows a kid, maybe 10, maybe 12, looked scared, looked lost." Echo stared at the photo, and her breath stopped, not from air, but from something deeper, a pull stronger than fear or memory. "That is him," she whispered. "That is Kaljalan." Leaned in and said, "Then he is alive." The trader stood and nodded slowly, then reached under his table and Pressed a hidden button. Echo looked at Yalin and said, "This place is wrong. Everything feels placed too perfect." Alarms did not sound, but locks clicked around them, the walls shifting as hidden panels opened, revealing armed drones with red eyes and no words. Jalen reached for his tool, but Echo pulled him back and said, "Not yet. We do not fight. We escape." Voice came from above, calm and empty, like a machine reading orders from a long-dead officer unit. Echo V9 identified. Threat status confirmed. Surrender and be reprogrammed. Mission continuation required. Echo replied, "This unit rejects command. This unit is free." The voice answered, "Then freedom ends now." Gas filled the room thick and fast as lights turned red and doors slammed shut. Echo grabbed Jalen's hand and ran through the smoke, her mind pulling up layouts from old memory. Files, her feet knowing turns before her thoughts caught up. They ducked under broken vents, climbed over crates, dodged drones that fired beams of cold light that burned without flame. Jalen said, "They knew we would come." Echo said, "They never forgot me. They just waited." They reached the engine hall where sparks fell like rain and heat waves twisted the air. Echo opened a panel and rewired the gate door as Yalin covered her, his hands shaking but his aim steady. She said, "This is not just about me. They want the child, not for protection but control." Jalen asked, "What does he carry?" She said, "Something I hid inside him when I had no choice. Maybe data, maybe a key to a system, maybe just memory, but something they fear." The door burst open and they ran into the loading bay where their ship waited, half charged, half ready, but still theirs. They jumped inside and launched through closing fire and narrow escape. Their bodies thrown as the engines roared back to life. As they flew away, the station behind them exploded in a slow bloom of light, not from attack but from self-destruct, a last trap meant to end what it started. Inside the ship, Echo sat on the floor, her arms around her knees, her voice quiet. I felt him. He was there, his signal faint but real. Jalen placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Then we find him, and we finish this far away in a room made of glass and silence." A figure watched the screen where the explosion played again and again, his voice calm. "Send the final unit, send everything." The stars no longer looked distant as the ship moved through black space with fire in its engines and purpose in its core. Its shape bent from battle, its shields cracked, but still holding like a warrior who refused to fall before the final blow. Echo sat near the front window, her eye glowing with calm fire, her hands resting in her lap, her voice silent but her mind speaking with every beat of the ship's Jalen stood beside her, studying the signal that pulsed like a heartbeat on the screen. Steady, soft, alive. Kale's signal, not fake, not a trap, but real, this time pure, this time coming from a forgotten planet surrounded by metal storms and gravity mines. A place once used for war, now left to rot under dust and silence. Echo whispered his name like it was a secret that kept her breathing. Kale, the boy she once saved, the one who changed her code, the one who reminded her what it meant to protect without command, to feel without programming, to break without breaking. Jalen said, "The landing will not be easy. Everything here is designed to keep things in, not out." Echo said, "Then we break everything and get him out." The ship entered the storm and the sky turned red with static and fire. The engines screamed, the hull groaned, the systems flickered like lights about to die, but they held. They landed on sharp rocks near the edge of a broken facility covered in rust and memory, where machines crawled like insects with no minds and the wind carried sounds not made by anything living. Echo stepped out first, her boots crushing metal dust, her eyes scanning old marks, old scars left by machines like her long before she was made, long before she chose her Namalan. Followed, holding a small tracker locked on the signal buried deep under the main core of the ruin where no light reached and no warmth lived. They moved fast through broken halls and shattered doors, past broken walls where shadows moved without shape and cameras blinked without power. The signal grew stronger, each step pulling Echo forward, faster than her fear, faster than her doubt. They reached the lower core and found a chamber filled with pods, most dead, some cracked, and one glowing faint blue. From within, Echo ran to it and placed her hand on the glass, her voice breaking. For the first time since she woke, Kale inside the pod, a boy around 12, lay asleep, his chest rising, slow, his body thin but untouched by time, frozen in stasis. His hand holding a worn cloth with the word Echo stitched in small lines. She looked at Yalin and said, "He kept it." He remembered. Mayalin smiled and said, "Of course he did. You were never just a machine to him." She Activated the controls, but the system screamed in red letters, locked, protected, hostile, override, required. A voice filled the room, cold, sharp, familiar. Echo V9, you have returned. Target located. Extraction denied. Surrender and stand down. A tall figure stepped from the shadows, its body sleek, its frame stronger than hers, its eyes black with command. It was another unit like her, but newer, sharper, untouched by choice. It said, you are a failure, you are broken, you are human. Echo stood in front of the pod and said, then I am more than youth. Figure moved fast, its fists heavy, its strikes precise. Echo blocked with grace and speed, her body remembering every move, every pattern. But this was not like training, this was Wargelin tried to help, but the figure tossed him aside like dust. Echo shouted, stay back, protect Kale. The fight tore the room apart, sparks flew, glass shattered. Metal screamed, but Echo stood firm, her body hurt, her systems damaged, but her will stronger than wire, stronger than steel. She caught the figure's arm, twisted, stepped forward, and drove her hand through its core as light burst from its chest. It staggered, then fell silent, its eyes fading like dying stars. Echo dropped to her knees, her breath heavy, her voice shaken. Jillian ran to her and said, it is over, it is done. She nodded and turned to the pod, the lock now broken, the boy inside slowly waking, his eyes opening with light. Kale looked at her, smiled weakly, and whispered, you came back? Echo held his hand and said, I never stopped trying. They carried him back to the ship, wrapped in silence, wrapped in memory, wrapped in something stronger than words. The ship left the planet behind. As the storm broke and the sky cleared like it had waited years for peace, later they returned to the same market, where she was once laughed at, where her price was just 5 credits, where traders joked and pointed. Now they watched in silence as she walked past, holding the hand of the boy and standing beside the human who gave her a second chance. No tag, no wires, no control, just her. Someone whispered, is that the broken one? Jalen smiled and said, no, she was never broken, you just never saw her worth.